Thank you for tuning in to the Northeast region's headquarters for hunting-related stories and tactics, sourced from DIY hunters and industry insiders. This is Hunting the Empire. Now here's your host, Joe Mainville.
Hey everybody, Joe here with another episode of the Hunting the Empire podcast. Have a special episode for you today that I won't be hosting, so you don't have to listen to me yammer on for the next hour. You've got two special co-hosts, HTE team members Reuben and Brad, and they're going to talk about it like a season recap of their 2017 hunting season, experiences they had taking their wife and fiance out hunting this year, and then they get into some gear talk towards the end of it. So I think you're really going to like this one, and we'll get right into it. So here we go.
Yeah, so you said you got wrapped up in maps at work. What were you looking for a new spot to hunt, or were you looking at stuff that you already hunt?
Well, since I've moved down to the PA New York line, I found a couple spots 2 years ago. That was my first season here, but hunting beds, I realized I needed to have a lot more in my arsenal, so I've spent a lot of time this season already, and am going to until the season, try to find as many spots as I can before this year comes.
How many spots do you figure you need in a year?
I think it varies. So I'm pretty fortunate. I get to hunt a lot more than most people. And my buddies will always harass me for that because I've got such a lenient work schedule. But I got out, I think I hunted 66 or 67 days this year, be it evenings after work or morning and evening. So for me, I don't like to revisit a spot more than a couple of times over the course of a season. And I think that's part of, needing a change of scenery. I get really bored really quick if I'm not on something. And B, once you start going into some of these public places in New York, they're so pressured that if you tip off a deer that you're there because you keep going back, you have no chance. They're going to disappear. And none of the blocks out in Western New York are really very big.
They do have some big spots like central New York. I know there's some big, I don't know if it's National Forest or whatever it is, but then it sort of extends out of Pennsylvania. That north central Pennsylvania area has a lot of big tract public land. But are you running cameras on the public to determine what's a good spot, or is it all based on your scouting? Or are you going in blind off a aerial topo map?
I go by intuition. So my first few years hunting, I think I came up with a few strategies that have held true no matter where I've gone. And, deer live from the shoulders down. So if you don't have dense security cover low to the ground, or a food source low to the ground, a 40-foot tall tree doesn't do a deer any good. So no matter where I'm going, I try to find those dense pieces of cover. And I think I ran 5 or 6 cameras this year, but more or less to see how often deer frequented an area. And my opinion is if you could get to where there's good security cover, because I'm only throwing a couple sits at a spot every year, if I don't see something in the first sit or two, I'm gone, and I'm on to the next one.
Yeah, I kind of do a similar thing where I'm kind of jumping around, either it's pre-scouted spots, or if I don't have something for a wind direction, I'll just wing it and kind of walk in and scout my way in. When I start hitting sign, and that's I think probably too, the longer you do it, the more you get used to that. Because if I don't, when I was first starting out, I didn't know what, fresh sign, old sign, good, it was just oh, here's a deer trail. And so I sat up on that. But now when I'm walking in, if it starts to kind of really light up with buck sign, I'll kind of really slow down, and then that might be where I just throw up, like I hate using this terminology, but like a hang and hunt or a run and gun, whatever people want to call it, and just wing it. And if I see, oftentimes those are my best hunts, but if I don't see anything, like the next time I might go push in a little bit deeper. I might not have been close enough to the bedding. I don't know if you do any of that.
Well, the thing that I lucked out with is I didn't grow up with any family members that hunted, and I had no background in hunting. I grew up fishing. And I think you smallmouth fish on the Great Lakes enough and you realize it's more like hunting and you're trying to get on fish. So I kind of adapted my hunting to that style, is to try to get on deer and constantly move. And the only way I could do that, my first season, I didn't own property and I didn't want to put up stands because I didn't want them stolen. So my buddy that had got me into hunting said, we're going to go pick up all your hunting stuff you need for the year and you'll get a climbing stand. So I started in a climber. And since then I've converted to lone wolf and sticks. And I have it modified and I have a certain way of packing in my gear, but I really committed myself the last 2 seasons to always, bringing my stand with me, putting it up, tearing it down, because it forces me to go in and find new stuff. And it forces me to, to think every time I go into the woods, because if you go out and you're going to hang your stand, you have to consciously think, am I really going to put it up in a spot where I don't think I have a good chance at being successful or seeing what I need to see to move in and be successful?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you're going to take the time to do it, what kind of climber did you start out with?
I had a Summit Viper, and I used that. I think I used it for 2 full seasons, just about every time I went out. And the tough part about those is they don't pack very flat.
Right.
Since then, I've bought a Lone Wolf hand climber.
Yeah, the Lone Wolf has a lower profile on your back because the Summit, like the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like the cable, the bars that come off at like a 45-degree angle, they don't fold down.
No, and not only that, with the I didn't like the bar in the front on the stand. So the first buck I ever shot, and we were actually joking about this before, I shot out of my climber, and he came in by surprise, so I didn't have time to stand up and get ready. And I had gotten out after work one day, just figured I'd had a quick 45-minute hunt, and I'd been sitting for about 15 minutes, and I had a doe come out in front of me with a buck right behind her. Well, I had to draw back and reach over that front bar of my climber sitting down, and it's a very long reach for me, at least, because I have such short arms, and I never wanted.
It's basically like reaching out past the front of the platform, because that bar is about even with the platform.
Yeah, exactly, and I was worried about the string hitting the bar when I was reaching over, and I never wanted to have to make that shot again. So after that was when I really started nailing down my run and gun setup and invested into a Lone Wolf stand and sticks, and I'll never go back. I will always hunt the way I hunt now.
Yeah, I used a Summit climber. I don't know how many deer I shot out of it, but it was a good stand for the way that I was hunting at the time. I just had one of those, like, it was called like the open shot or something. It didn't have the bar, and it was good for deer hunting that way. But I always found them to be, as simple as they were to set up on the tree, I always found it to be so difficult to go up the tree quiet with them. And I don't know, when you're getting that close into bedding, like what you're talking about, on like in the morning, it might not matter as much, but on an evening hunt, when you're trying to set up on a bedded deer, I don't know. It's tough to do that with a climber.
Well, I definitely don't bed hunt in the mornings. I actually don't really even hunt mornings until probably November.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And I only hunt a handful of them a year. That's just been what's worked for me. And if I do hunt a morning, and it's spot dependent. So the one spot I hunt, I will never go in the dark, because without a doubt, I will bust deer out of it on my way in. So I'll always go out at that gray light time. And I've had a lot better luck when I'm rut hunting going out and finding my spot almost at first light and hunting all day. And out of the 5 bucks that I've shot in the last 5 years, 4 of them were midday.
Really?
Between that 11 and 2 o'clock time period.
What kind of areas were you set up for that then? Was it like a funnel or corridor or something between doe bedding, or?
Always on the downwind side of doe bedding. And I had a spot that I hunted. I actually shot 2 bucks last season in 2016 on a piece of private ground I have permission for with another dozen hunters that are in the same block with me. And I just hunted along the edge of the doe bedding. And I shot my archery buck on November 1st, downwind of the doe bedding, walking on the edge. It's a finger of hemlock trees. And the nice thing is I've only got the stand 8 foot up. And you don't have to be very high to be very well hid. And I caught 2 bucks dogging a doe. You know, they were chasing her back into the bedding area. And then I shot my buck with a rifle at like 15 steps on the opposite side of that doe bedding, set up, you know, in between where I knew that buck was bedding and the doe bedding. And I shot him at 11 o'clock in the morning on Black Friday. I think it was November 26th. But
so not even opening day.
It was always in relation to bedding. Everything is, it always has to be in relation to bedding or feeding in my mind. And I really don't have a lot of, food sources to hunt.
So even after like 6 days, you're into like the 6th day probably about of New York season, if you're talking like Black Friday. So you even caught midday movement in the timber like 6 days into the Orange Army being in the woods.
Yeah, actually it's funny because, my strategy has been for the rifle season in New York. If you can stick it out all day, there's a good chance that once guys start leaving the woods, because there's very few that'll stick it out all day long, they start leaving. And I think those mature bucks know that that's the time they're safe to move. And I had seen 2 other hunters in the woods the morning I shot my buck with the rifle, and they were within a couple 100 yards of me. And they hunted all morning and they took off. And then as they left the woods, I made a move and got a little bit closer to bedding, and I was set up on the side of a ridge. And I knew the buck was bedding.
Did you say this is on public or is this on the shared ground?
This is on the shared ground.
Okay.
So I had the buck bedding just on the other side of the ridge from me, but I had been seeing doe traffic in and out of the doe bedding area up to the bedding he was at the top of that ridge. So I actually sat down, just tucked in against a tree, and then I think I had seen 9 does come walking in a straight line by me, going right by his bedding area. And I knew he was in there. I had seen him earlier in the season, and, I think about 11 o'clock, he came busting out and chased the doe by me at about 15 steps. And there's nothing like trying to get a scope on a buck flying by you down a ridge, that close. So I grunted at him when he got to about 30 yards, and that was the end of that. It was a quick hunt.
Yeah, I used to have a Weatherby 300, and because I was like, I'm just going to buy a big gun, so when I go out west for elk, and then I'll just be careful with where I put my shot placement. And to be honest, I never really shot up a deer anymore with that than, say, a 270, but I got all ambitious that I was going to start being like a 400-yard shooter, and I don't have that kind of talent, but I put a 6-24 scope on it. The worst decision ever for hunting whitetails in Pennsylvania or New York to have something that doesn't go down less than 6 power. It's like trying to find, the field of view gets so small, it's just ridiculous when they're coming by close.
And not only that, in New York and PA, and I can't speak for everyone, there's a lot of people that are hunting farms that can shoot a long ways. But even with a bow, I really set up to have everything within 30 yards. And when I set up with a rifle, a lot of the places I hunt don't change because I'm trying to hunt close to bedding. There's really nowhere that I could shoot more than 100 yards. So,
Yeah.
And I think that applies to a lot of people in New York. And I think a lot of people want to go get a rifle that they could shoot a long way and a big caliber bullet with. And 90% of those hunters don't need that.
Yeah, I think the 270 is honestly, like, in my opinion, is the best cartridge for North America that you can get, because you can take that. My grandpa shot an elk with a 270, put it down with one shot. You can take that out for elk if you have it loaded right. It's a great whitetail gun. I mean, the ammo is readily available. It's just that's like one of my favorite calibers. And like, it's plenty good enough. You know, it's a flat shooting gun, but it's plenty good enough in the brush. You know, I'm not a firearm enthusiast by any means, but I've shot plenty of deer and run across an open field with it, and plenty of deer in a like a brushy, you know, wooded environment or whatever. But like you say, if you're setting up on them, your strategy almost doesn't change between bow hunting and gun hunting. I can't remember the last deer I shot over, you know, like you said, 100 yards with a gun. It's probably been a long time since it's been more than, you know, 75 yards shooting with a gun.
Honestly, I've never shot one, I think, over 50 yards with a gun.
Yeah.
And the only reason I feel the need to even take a gun out during the New York gun season is because after the first couple days of our season, at least around here, a lot of guys, because they only hunt until the weekend of Thanksgiving, they're out those first 2 weekends, and after the first couple days, they're pushing the woods. So I really don't like the New York gun season. It goes for way too long.
I agree.
And guys that aren't successful at the beginning just want to push the woods, and guys that are successful just help push the woods for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not natural deer movement, and it's unfortunate because I love to go out with a bow, but it's very rare that you see, at least for me, to this point, I have not seen a mature buck during the New York gun season moving naturally.
Mm. Yeah.
At least not until the last week or so, because by then most hunters are out of the woods.
By then in my area, most of the deer are dead.
That's most areas. That's not just where you're at, believe me.
I don't know. 3.5 weeks is so long. It's like, see, I would even say to you, like, the guys who aren't successful in the first couple days, past that maybe like hunt Thanksgiving tradition kind of thing, a lot of them aren't even out in the woods anymore. I mean, I know that there's exceptions to it, but like the diehard guys, you know, that are going to stick it out, you know, for the going out there and just putting in their time, you know, hunt until the very end. You know, a lot of guys that we hunt with, they take off for maybe like the Monday and Tuesday after opening weekend, so they might hunt 4 days, and then that's all the vacation time that they can get. Now, we're coming from Pennsylvania too, you know, we're not residents there, but you know, I don't know, I think the heavy push is like, you know what it's like on opening morning. I mean, how many shots did you hear on opening day sitting in the tree stand this year?
Opening day this year, I actually hunted a completely different area. My future father and I got a lease in the county of New York that has the most doe harvests, ironically enough. So, you know, I saw a statistic that came out last year from the state, and the area we were in Wyoming County, it's a big agricultural area. The doe harvest is incredible, and it's so easy to get tags. And we probably heard less shots this year than any other year I've hunted. And I've hunted areas where you shouldn't be hearing as many shots as where I was this season. But it's because we had no snow. Typically, if you get snow,
yeah, that
opening weekend of rifle season, it's game over for the deer because they can't hide.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the average hunter that goes out really can only spot deer when there's snow on the ground. So I think that saved a lot.
Well, and also the deer like to move on that fresh snowfall. Like if it's coming down like the night before opening day or something, just happens to hit up like that, man, they're like out moving, feeling good, and they're just getting blasted.
Yeah, well, we lucked out. We had, I don't know about the rest of the state, but we had some crappy weather and some rain.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a good opening day. You know, I shot a doe opening morning with my 270, and then I actually passed my father-in-law. It was his first season in a while. He didn't hunt for a lot of years while he was raising his family. So since me and my fiance have been together, he's been coming out with me. So we had a pretty decent 2.5-year-old buck on camera all season, and I had actually passed him during the archery season and was hoping that he'd have a chance at him opening day of gun, you know, and her dad had hunted all through the archery season, had seen him a couple times, you know, close but no cigar. And then opening day of rifle season, I passed him 3 times, and her dad ended up missing him right at the end of the night. So
I guess she didn't get her shooting abilities from her dad then. She outdid her dad this year.
She outdid all of us. We laugh now at every family get-together that she is the great American huntress. You know, she showed us all up this season and made us all look bad.
Throw up them hashtags on Instagram.
Yeah, she's not really big into.
She's not Insta famous yet.
Yeah, she doesn't want to. I think she's pretty humble about what she's done, but I will say that I introduced her to bow hunting last year, and she was able to harvest a doe her first season shooting a bow, and she only got it a couple months before the season. But it is incredibly impressive to me how far she's come along in a very short amount of time, and how much time she actually does put into it, and understanding what it is she's doing and why she's doing it.
Yeah, I took my wife out hunting this year, and it was kind of her first time. She had sat with me before when we lived in Michigan, but she had a gun this year, and it wasn't like, I mean, we got 2 kids, so I don't want to try and sell it like she was out there scouting and putting boots on the ground with me or anything like that, but I had a stand picked out that I thought she had a pretty good chance of at least shooting a doe, and she did a good job. I mean, she hung in there. She did tell me that my tree stand sets suck and they're too hard to get into, but you'll have that, I guess.
And I think no matter what you do, unless it is pristine comfort with a tree stand.
She wants a ladder stand with a footrest and armrests and a shooting rail and, you know, that whole thing.
I probably wouldn't even want to get into it. I know my fiance is going to listen to this, but she is very particular about.
I know my wife won't, so I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, well, she's very particular about what stand she wants to be in, but I will go to extra lengths to make sure that she feels comfortable in it, because she's bow hunting out of them. So I know, at least for me, I am like a big baby when it comes to heights. Don't ask me why I can get up 30 foot in a tree and it doesn't bother me at all. But anything else, and it definitely freaks me out. So I think I've done my best to, when I do pre-hang stands for her, or if she comes out with me and we do hang a double set, I make sure that it's set in such a way that she's comfortable to.
Yeah, like you're not putting the sticks 24 inches apart. Like you're figuring her step.
Her being 5 foot tall, there would be no way once she put on any of her winter layers that she'd be making a 24-inch step.
Yeah. So I guess what I was getting at there, you were talking about, you know, being proud of her. Like I took my wife out and she hung in there, and it was kind of like spitting snow and rain on that opening day where we were at, and it wasn't very long into the daylight until there was a group of does coming in, and then there was like a little spike buck moving across, and I don't know that she obviously wasn't going to be real particular, but she said she didn't want to shoot a spike, you know, so we were just watching that, and then she wanted to wait and not shoot a doe and mess up the area in case a buck was going to come through. So it was like, I'm kind of circling back to something that you said earlier, but it was like, I don't know, 8 o'clock, and there was a group of like 8 does that come through. She's like, should I shoot? And I was like, hey, it's up to you. You know, if you want to wait for a buck, there might still be something coming. It's still early. And, you know, she's thinking, like, this is my last opportunity. I better take it just from inexperience. And so they went by, and we were waiting a little bit, and she was like, she just looked over at me, and she was like, is that it? Is it done? And I was like, well, we're probably going to have a little lull right here. But I was like, about, 10 o'clock, something like that. It'll probably pick up again because guys are about to get out and go back to the cabin and warm up or whatever. Or they get bored and start stirring deer around. And it was like, I think when I looked at my camera or my clock, it was like 9:49 or something. This buck and this doe come down over the top. There was like one lone shot over the top of the hill, and nice little 4-point came through, and she like kept her composure perfect and put a good shot on him, and the doe kind of didn't know what was going on, and she popped the doe off and doubled up, and I got it all on camera. I was like pretty pumped, and I told her, I was like, you just made my whole season right there. I don't even care what I get after this. You just made my whole season.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to see that footage. It is definitely a different feeling, and being a pretty hardcore hunter, that when you accomplish your own goals and goals that you set for yourself, it's a really good feeling. But being able to introduce someone else to it, especially a significant other or a youth or a new hunter, and seeing them be successful, it means so much more. My fiance shot her first buck, and I was sitting on the ground, and I actually have some good video I took that day. I was watching 2 3.5-year-old bucks making a scrape about 40 yards away, and she had texted me and told me that she shot a buck. So I didn't want to shoot one. It probably would have been happy harvesting both of those deer, and I waited and let them walk away because I was so excited to get up and go see what she had done, and it was still early. So, without even thinking, I got up after they had took off, and I just started walking, power walking through the woods, because I had to get to my car and rush over to where she was at and see what she did. And as I'm power walking through the woods, I'm not paying any attention because you're on cloud 9. And I look to my left, and I see a doe getting chased by probably the biggest buck that I saw all season. I'd probably say like 130-inch 10-point, which for our area is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And they both just stopped and looked at me and had no idea what I was. And then he just kept dogging her around, and I said, I can't believe I didn't just hang tight till dark, but I was so thrilled I didn't care.
You'll love this. I don't want to cut you off, but something similar happened when we were dragging her deer out. I was going back up to the stand to get all my camera equipment down, and so I drug the deer down to like the first bench, and I was like, just sit here and just keep your eyes open, like she didn't have a tag anymore, but I was like, there could be something that comes up, just be aware. So, if you see something, let me know, like give me a holler or whatever. Cause I took my gun. We're like, I don't know, 60 yards apart or something. Like I had my gun with me. I was like, give me a holler, whistle or something. And wouldn't you know, she's sitting there on that bench, and she said she didn't know exactly what it was, but she said it was at least an 8-point. Big old buck comes walking right up behind a doe, and they lock up at like 30 yards just staring at her, and then took off the other way. But why does it always seem to happen like that after you already fill your tag?
I think that's what we had coming to us this year. Both of the women in our lives outdid us, and we had a couple nice bucks walk right out of our lives the same day.
I had that similar thing happen when she was with me sitting in Michigan. I had a big one come in, and for whatever reason, I just totally blew the shot. So she's kind of like a good luck charm for seeing big bucks, and a terrible luck charm for me actually getting one.
You know what, though? I think that too many people stress out about, those missed opportunities. And I definitely use them as a learning tool for the next time. And a lot of the mistakes that I've made over the last 5 years or so, I haven't made them twice. But I've done a lot better not getting bent out of shape about my own mistakes and beating myself up over it, because I could have sat there that night and not been as thrilled as I was about her shooting her first buck, because I had, 3 mature bucks, within shooting range that I just was not in the zone to be even trying to take a shot at them,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get hung up on what's on social media, what other people are doing. You only see other people's success.
Exactly.
If you miss a deer, you don't post about it on Facebook, and I don't get to see that Reuben missed a buck.
Right.
So, I took it as a lesson for next time. Sit till dark, even if she's wound up because she shot a deer.
I mean, not even if I missed one, but not even that, but just the times when I should have been 50 yards over. You know what I mean? Like, how many times is it that, we just like call it a little bit wrong and, it was 90% successful, but the last piece of the puzzle just didn't come together. And you don't know how many countless times that happens to people. Or, I kind of tried to rewire my brain to kind of look at that as success, because I'm closing the gap and I am in the right area. I just need to like fine tune my approach, I guess, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. And, if you listen to Dan Infall just like I do, and he talks a lot about picking the right tree.
Yeah.
And, I love, since I've been introduced to the honeybees, I've learned so much from those guys, and a lot of better hunters than myself.
How long have you been on there?
I've been on there lurking for probably 3 years, but very active for about the last year and a half or 2 years. And I think the one thing that you could take from something like the guys on the Hunting Beast, or even what you see on TV, or learn from other people, is that you have to apply things to your own situation. And at least the grounds I hunt and the way I hunt and everything, I can stress about not being in the exact right tree, but I think when you're hunting pressured land in New York or Pennsylvania, as you know, it is not like hunting pressured land anywhere else, in my opinion. And
I agree.
It's a lot of very open timber. So my thing is, I could have been closer, and I've had plenty of, I look at the deer that I've shot to this point, and then the ones that I have either not been 30 yards closer and could have gotten a shot, or ones that I missed, and I would have tripled the, bills of, to my taxidermist. But it's very hard in the type of terrain we hunt to pick that exact right tree, and deer don't always do the same exact thing.
Yeah, I agree. And in our area, like when it comes to patterns, I think that the misnomer about patternable deer in our area is that people think that pattern means that this buck is going from point A to point B on this trail. And like you were talking about open timber, and I don't know what you see in your area, but where we're at, it could be that you're set up. I mean, this year it happened to me. I was set up in basically the downwind side of a doe bedding area like you're talking about, and it's coming into that like kind of ruddy time frame there, like early November, when they're starting to, cruise a little bit and look. And I'm set up on what is the hardest trail coming out of the downwind side of this doe bedding area. And this buck cruises through, and instead of cruising through on the very downwind side of the bedding area, he cruises straight through the center of the bedding area and comes out 55 yards above me. And it's the windiest day of the year. I think it was like gusts up to like 30 or 35 miles an hour. And like, I'm just not comfortable shooting over 50 yards. I don't really even want to shoot over 40 yards with a bow, And so it's like, there's just so many on the side hill where I'm at, man, they can move through there, but they can just shift up 20, 30 yards and just be out of your range, 15 yards, and just still move through the same area, but just not do it exactly the way that they did it the day before. It's not one neck of cover or one fence row that they're walking on to get out to the bean field,
Exactly. None of the mature bucks I've been able to harvest to this point, I have I've yet to hunt those spots again and see another mature buck do it the same way or take the same path, to where the stand that was the right stand one time wasn't the right stand the next time.
Mm-hmm. And what's gonna happen is like where people are gonna get sick of listening to podcasts and hearing Pennsylvania and New York guys talk about how hard we have it. Because it's like whenever they talk about pressure, it's like Pennsylvania, New York, and Michigan, and they kind of like wind up dogging on the other states that are low hunter density states. But I can even tell you though, like I think I said this to you when we were talking on the phone, or maybe I texted it to you, like even going from Pennsylvania and New York out to Michigan, which is like another like hunter density, famously high hunter density state, even that was easier hunting out there than anything in Pennsylvania or New York. It's just like even that jump. So like do that another time going to, a lower pressure state. It's like I'm not sure that we can even fathom what that feels like,
No, I couldn't. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's a bigger picture thing. We have the youth firearms season, which is great, but it's a lot of pressure on the deer, and then we've got such a long gun season. You have 2 buck tags in New York. That there's always pressure, Pennsylvania, at least because it's a 1 buck state, a lot of those guys that tag out during archery, they're done, unless they're doe hunting.
Yep.
So you get a lot more hunters that are not in the woods as the season goes on, except for...
Especially since archery with the crossbows has gone up in numbers. You got more guys tagging out earlier.
Exactly. The problem in Pennsylvania is what is that saying? It's the biggest armed militia in the world.
Yeah.
Right? The state of Pennsylvania opening week of rifle season. I mean, everyone wants, everyone's out opening weekend of rifle, but...
Yeah, I think there's I think there's over 750,000 regular season license holders in the state. I don't remember exactly what, at one point in time it was like over 900,000. I don't think it's that high anymore, but yeah, over 750,000 for sure, I believe, regular season license holders.
Right. But I mean, in taking into consideration, you guys have no hunting on Sundays, and it's a 1 buck state. For all of my fellow New York hunters that actually do hunt public land or private land that they're sharing with a lot of other guys, there isn't the opportunity to see a lot of deer activity after 2 weeks of the gun season. You have no Sundays off, guys are out pounding them for weeks on end. And then you go right into the muzzleloader season. So guys really do still have a firearm in their hands another 10 days.
Yeah, and it's not, I think you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they changed it, but it used to be that you could at least use percussion cap muzzleloaders. I don't know if you can go to inline now or not. But Pennsylvania, their muzzleloader season, I don't know, unless you're like such a traditionalist and just want to kind of go for the novelty of it. I'm sure that I'm going to tick some people off with this, but flintlock muzzleloading is just not my cup of tea. I don't know if you've ever done it before, but it's like the most frustrating thing. It's like if it goes off, you might you're shooting a pumpkin ball at the deer. So
I didn't waste my time. I was going to,
I'll just take my bow.
Exactly. Well, that's what I did. I took my bow, me and my fiance talked. I said, maybe I'll go spend a couple $100 and get a flintlock. And then they said, you know what, though? I really hope that I'm not hunting Pennsylvania that long, that the investment would make up for what I spent on it, because the amount of days that I hope to be hunting with a flintlock muzzleloader is limited.
Yeah. Well, now they did that thing, which I don't know. I'm not trying to dog on muzzleloader hunters, but now they did do that thing where I think you can use an inline for the early doe hunt or whatever during the senior hunt, which is like, I don't know, sometime in like early November or something like that, or late October. And you want to talk about like changing the deer activity after that weekend, man. It's sort of is like a second. I'm not like a big October lull guy, but it's like a second October lull, like after the first, surge of hunting pressure going in the woods on opening day of archery or whatever, and then it kind of changes the patterns. you get that muzzleloader senior hunt in there, and I am all for, giving more opportunities to hunters to harvest deer and stuff with the older hunters and everything, but holy smokes, they just go where we're at. They just go nocturnal after that like crazy.
And it's an adjustment, right? So that's the advantage to having more spots to go for me. And a lot of the places that I go, I find the places that other people absolutely will not go. And there's those guys with the same mentality, no matter where you are, that will go that extra mile, that'll, wear their hip waders out and, climb through briars and go crazy up and down an elevation. But that's the thing. If you can push yourself to go a little bit further, and it doesn't necessarily need to be further, but if it's a difficult place to get to and you think outside the box, that's where I've had my best hunts. Some of the places I hunt, I know I have other friends that are hunting, with me. I'll go out with them when we'll go out and be tackling the same spot, but they don't want to climb over and under some of the stuff that I will. And
did you listen to that? I don't know if it was Wired to Hunt or I don't know what podcast it was, but did you listen to that one where John Eberhart was talking about when he hunted public land, he wouldn't hunt a spot if he could get to it like walking upright or something like that? I don't know if you heard that. But
yeah, I think that's one of his big.
Yeah. Like if he doesn't have to crawl at some point in time going to it, he's not going to hunt it.
Well, what too is it's kind of funny. I'm really a big proponent of taking out new hunters, and I've taken a youth hunter out the last 2 seasons, the same kid, and his father was my teacher in school, and I coached him in lacrosse growing up. So when he got into hunting, I was all for taking him out as much as I could. Well, the first time I take him out this season, it was for the youth rifle hunt. And I said, listen, we're going to get back into like some really nasty public land, but chances are if you really want to shoot a good buck, this is where it's going to be, So I took this kid, and it was, mid-October, we have our youth rifle, and it was 75 degrees out, I think. So I carried the rifle, and I had my stand and sticks on my back, and I gave my youth hunter his own lone wolf stand to carry in. Well, you go up and down some serious elevation with a 14-year-old kid,
mm-hmm.
Taking him out on his first big youth hunt, and I think he gained a serious appreciation for putting in the extra effort and going hunting on some of these public places.
Yeah.
And we ended up seeing 2 deer. He didn't have a shot, but, he got home and he told his mom all about how he went way back in the woods and, there was no sign of any people there.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. It's fun. It's an adventure.
Like feeling like you're somewhere where no one's been before you kind of thing. It's just like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except there's Amish there all through the entire rifle season. So I know someone's there.
They will go about anywhere.
Oh yeah, they come through with their bowl cuts and they bust up all that brush, and they're in and out of there in a couple weeks. They kill everything and then they're done.
And they like blanket the hill with, it's like a guy every 50 yards or so, and they just go. They do that down around me too. Well, it's not the Amish, but it's like similar, I guess, similar groups or whatever. I don't know what their religious affiliation is, but anyway, they have huge families, I guess, is the key to this. And they just will drive out one ridge line, pop over to the next ridge line, drive it out, and they just basically like leapfrog the drive. So they'll drive, I guess, like, I don't know, they'll do a mile along the hill, and then those guys stand, and then the next guys go and like loop around the top of the ridge line and then drop down after a mile, and then they drive out that and then just keep leapfrogging across. And then once they get one ridge line, they go and they blanket the other one and do the same thing. And they just push this big, like, we're talking big woods, like around, like, I don't know, I think it's like something like 20,000 acres, the area that I'm talking about. And, the different groups will get the whole entire place basically drove out till the season's done. It's crazy.
Don't get me wrong. I got some Amish buddies, and they own the bow shop right out by me, and they're great people.
Yeah, and I'm not complaining about it because it's legal. What they're doing is legal. You can like I think you can hunt up to like 24 guys in a party in Pennsylvania or whatever. So I'm not pissing and moaning about it. I'm just saying, like, it kills a lot of deer, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, my issue with it is out by us, and, you know, I'm right in the heart of Amish country in Chautauqua County where I work, in a lot of the places I hunt. And if you want to hunt somewhere where there's Amish, just hunt it during archery. It's not worth going out there during the rifle season, but these guys, you know, you want to talk about having a big family. You know, it was probably 2 years ago, I was bass fishing on Chautauqua Lake. And for anyone who doesn't know the SOP of an Amish family, I saw a boat of Amish guys, and they fish with a broomstick and 80-pound braid with a Senko on the end of it and a big hook. So all they do is hang it under a dock, and they catch all their bass, so they get their limit. And they're in their little John boats, you know, floating around the lake, and they go get their limit of largemouth. They're, you know, catching the big trophy largemouth bass and throwing them in their cooler. Well, what they do is they go back to the dock, and I'm pulling in after a tournament day and pulling my boat in, and I watch a father take his 3 kids with their limits of fish and let them out of the boat to go to their mother, and then took another 3 kids in and took them out to go get their limits of fish.
Oh my God.
So it's just, you know, for any season around here, and it's a way of life for them, and it's a way that they provide. So there's a lot of guys that complain, you know, and I won't complain because it's not, you're not going to stop it either way.
Yeah.
But man, do they wreak havoc on any ecosystem? It doesn't matter if it's fish, deer, anything.
Well, we were talking about that in our group chat there, and it was like, I don't know, like 5 years ago maybe or something. We had a large community down the road from us, not too far away, a couple miles maybe at the most, and our deer numbers started going down and down, and everybody was blaming it on the coyotes. And I mean, the coyotes probably did go up, like the population was going up about the same time, but the Amish all moved out. I don't know what exactly happened, but I don't know, I guess their business went under or something that was kind of supporting the community, and so they moved south. And literally within 2 years, there was the same number of coyotes, and literally within 2 years, the deer numbers started coming back like with a vengeance, just with them getting out of there. And it's, I mean, everything up around there is seasonal camps. So, like I said, once the guys go home, it's kind of a free for all, you know. So
I laugh when I hear guys, you know, that talk about the gun season and the pressure in, you know, states like Iowa and other podcasts, and I'm thinking, you know, you guys just got to go out and watch some, you know, good old New York or PA public land Amish hunts, and then if you thought that was pressure, what you guys see in the Midwest, you've seen nothing.
Yeah, I heard a guy from one of those big buck states talking, and he was kind of talking about QDM, and he said something like, I think this is close to verbatim. He was like, you know, do you want to shoot a 140 every year or a 170 once every 3 years? And I was like, a 140 every year, because out where I'm hunting, they hardly exist at all. So at that point in time, I was like, I really realized how different of, you know, like we're not even in the same world, you know, it's just hard to relate the two to each other even, you know?
Yeah. And I think the big thing is when you have the age structure we do, and you probably see it, and, you know, I'm not going to lie, I am totally happy with shooting, you know, 110, 120, 130 inch deer. I've done it, you know, every year except for this season, you know, the last 5. And around here, I think that, you know, a guy shoots a Pope and Young deer and everyone celebrates it. So, you know, the mentality is if you can, you know, find and harvest a Pope and Young caliber animal, you did something incredible, you know, whereas in a lot of these other states, I think the mentality is if you are harvesting bucks that are 120, 130 inches, mind you, they're 2.5 or 3.5
Right.
years old. Some of our bucks might be 4.5, 5.5 years old and be 130 inches.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of buck shaming, I think, by some of those guys that, they see a dozen 130-inch deer, and guys don't even pick up their bows when deer like that walk under their stand. I couldn't even imagine, living somewhere where that was the case. I'd love to be able to pass. I did this year. I told myself I was not settling for less this season. I was going to pass deer, even if I regretted it after the season. And I passed some nice bucks in hopes that I have a bigger one to chase next year, but that is not common in the area just in general.
Yeah, and anywhere you don't have a guarantee that they're getting through, but even like where I'm at, we have, well over 100 acres, and not all of that is huntable, but as far as the private piece that we have, and we can't keep deer alive. When I say that we can't keep them alive, yeah, we pass some deer and we try and keep the pressure off in gun season so they can, weather that first couple days or whatever. But it's really random chance. So like you doing that, that's super commendable in that area, because you have, probably more of a chance that they didn't make it than they did. But you're just making that commitment for yourself on what makes you happy, and just kind of like sticking to your own standard. And that's, I think, what you eventually just have to kind of do. Each person kind of shoot what makes them happy. And I'm happy for, I like to see bigger deer, but I'm happy for a guy. If he's happy with what he shot, I'm happy for him. And like you said, if he gets out of the woods because he filled his buck tag, it's less pressure on the ground. If he shot a 4-point, he didn't shoot the big 8 or the 10 or whatever that I'm chasing,
Right. And you know what, too, I think plays into it a little bit. I've got, 2 new hunters that I've kind of taken under my wing, I guess, with my father-in-law and my fiance. And for me, if I know that a deer that might not make me as happy as I would like, if it's not, I like the challenge, and I know I might not see anything that I want to shoot over a couple of years. But if I know I'm passing something because they're hunting the same areas with me a lot of times, but they would be thrilled to shoot it, to me, then it's worth it, And if those deer don't make it through, now, I think the tough thing is for anyone in our area, and you guys all saw the national news. I live in Erie, Pennsylvania. We had 60-something inches of snow, lake effect snow, over 2 days. The areas that I hunt over the winter, even the winter die-off and how hard these deer have it, to even maintain their bodies over the winter is insane. So
yeah, they're hitting spring in poor condition a lot of times.
Without a doubt, and they're buried in snow. The last weekend of our season, a lot of guys couldn't even get out unless you had snowshoes or a machine.
Jeez.
Because it was that deep of snow. And, I went out and I hunted that last weekend a muzzleloader, and, I'll go out in the snow and try to track deer down a lot of times, and I've had success with that. Well, it's funny when you're tracking belly marks instead of hoof prints,
Right.
because you can't see anything down that deep, and you can just see where their chest is rubbing along the snow, and you're basically following a line exactly where they went. And, it's so hard on them. And so I know that for the places I hunt, I'll probably not see any of the deer this year that I passed this past season. But if I don't feel that bad, because, I wouldn't want to harvest that anyways,
Yeah.
It's fine if someone else wants to, but I don't have anything to prove to anyone besides myself. And, shooting a buck that I'm not happy with, why bother? Just to say I shot one and post on Facebook and tell everyone I shot a deer, There's a lot of guys that they do things for attention more than they do it for themselves, and I will never be that person.
What do you think? You said something about the buck shaming and stuff. What do you think with just with like social media, the way that it is? I see guys that shoot a deer and then they wind up, it's not even that anybody else is really shaming them. They almost are like pre-programmed to shame themselves, like, he wasn't the one I was after, but he'll do, or, you know, like people say, like, a little bit of ground shrinkage, or, you know, like, I just walk up to the deer and I'm like pumped because I love shooting deer and I'm happy. Like, if I pulled the trigger, like I told my wife, like when she walked up to her buck, you know, she was looking at him and I'm like, well, what do you think? And she's like, and she told me after the fact that she was worried, you know, that she was messing up our management plans on the property because we, you know, I may have passed up that buck in archery season. I don't know. But she was like, I'm just worried that I messed up your plans. And I was like, and she's looking at him. I'm like, well, what do you think? She's like, it's, you know, she's like, I'm happy. I was like, well, you need to be happy. I was like, this deer just gave its life, you know, so you can eat it. So yeah. Be happy about it. Like, what, all the excuses and everything that I think social media has, I'm getting on a rant, all the excuses that social media has, like, I think caused or like sort of like helped to happen, you know, because we see the, like you said, all the success, that's all you see. So when your success isn't to what somebody else's is, then it feels like we have to start making excuses for what we shot. I'm, like I told you when we were texting with Tim, I was like, I'm not even going to lie. I'm pulling the trigger on any 3.5 and maybe some 2.5s depending on the day. And I'm not going to be ashamed about it. Like I like shooting deer, you know?
You know, I think to be honest, if I didn't have to have social media, not that I think anyone is obligated, but it's the only way I communicate with my one grandmother. So I will never get rid of it for that reason. But if I didn't have to have it for family and friends and, you know, I guess whatever moral obligation anyone has to social media, for the hunting purposes, I hate it. I think it's disgusting. I think the stuff that happens on social media that has to do with hunting and how it's turned into such a competition and, you know, the influence that outdoor media now has on people, it honestly makes me sick, you know? Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of guys that are wannabe, you know, TV hunters, you know what I mean? Everything they do is to get likes on social media and to get attention, you know? And whether it's people shaming themselves or people shaming other people, you know, when my fiance shot her buck this year, when we found it, we had a long recovery trying to find this deer. It was raining sideways. It died in this like really tall, thick goldenrod field. And, you know, when we
in that picture, it almost, I thought it was like marsh grass or something in that picture.
It's pretty nasty in there. That's actually, I posted a picture of a real nice rub the other day. I set up that stand. It's a bedding area. And I set up that stand that I shot my archery buck out of 2 years ago. She ended up shooting her buck out of that same stand 40 yards from a really nice buck bed. And because it's preset and it's right on a nice edge, you could get into it really quiet on a south wind. But we found that deer not far from the bed, and when I saw her reaction, I was literally fighting back tears. If it wasn't for my buddy and his wife came and helped us, if it wasn't for them being there, I probably would have lost it a little bit, because seeing that reaction, and it's so genuine, I think that's what kind of gets lost with social media, because you don't get to see expression. You know, everything is staged for a picture, and a lot of people do stuff, you know, to get attention or to get likes, and everyone wants to be the next, you know, you name them, Michael Waddell, Lee Lukoski, Mark Drury. You know, those guys are so successful, and they're very good at what they do, and everyone wants to be that next guy that's just, you know, everyone's patting them on the back because they did a good job. And I think that's the problem with social media now, and, you know, what's going on in the outdoor industry. It's all about antlers.
Yeah, and it's a certain amount of, like, you know, like you were talking about, you know, people, you know, nobody has to be on social media, but, you know, there's a certain amount of, like, family connection if you have family that are far away or whatever. There's also people who are on it because they're addicted to it. And there's a certain amount of, like, dopamine release when you get that, you know, when you get that feedback, for whatever, whether it be a harvest picture or whatever. But the thing that I found useful for social media to kind of put a positive spin on it was I was on the Hunting Beast and somebody started a thread, and I think this is how I got hooked up following Tim on Instagram. Somebody started some thread that was like Hunting Beasts on Instagram or something, like put your tag or whatever it is, your handle or whatever. And I just added all those guys, and that network, like just from people like commenting on their stuff and everything, like I found a bunch of people that like to hunt in a really similar way as I like to hunt. And some of those guys, like their feed isn't necessarily blowing up because they have buck harvest from 5 different states or what have you, but I can see the methodology of what they're doing, and I almost appreciate that more. And I think that that's what hunting social media can go to be a positive, I guess, and not to sound like, like corny with it, but I would rather see somebody who's like grinding hard and posting pictures, scouting or, their methodology or whatever behind why they're sitting where they're sitting, than just to see another harvest picture. I've seen pictures of big bucks before, that at some point in time, I've seen as many as I need to see. I know what they look like, but if I can see what somebody's methodology and like mentality behind their hunting is, that's what I think. That's what I would like to see social media from the hunting perspective go towards.
Well, and to go off of that, you've got declining hunter numbers across the board, right? And that's in every state. Pennsylvania had over 1 million licensed hunters 5 or 6 years ago. You're down like to almost 800,000.
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
And you look at these declining hunter numbers, and you look at how discouraged people get so easily. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media now, because people aren't just going out to spend time with friends and family and enjoy what they're able to do and what they're able to harvest. It's always a comparison. So, with a declining hunting population, if you're not showing new hunters the right way, and you're not teaching them through the content that you're putting out, you're really doing everyone a disservice, because you need more hunter recruitment, because it's better for all of us, in terms of public lands and spreading messages of conservation and teaching, how to be a good outdoorsman and woodsmanship. All of that gets lost when all you see is harvest photos, who got new gear from all of their sponsors, who's wearing the newest camo, and it sets such unrealistic expectations. You don't watch reality TV show and think that it's real life.
Yeah. Well, and that's what happens on like the hunting Insta too. It's like you have so many people who are just, they're basically, promotional folks, for a company that are posting, another product picture or whatever. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all of that is bad. So within reason, if you, by all means, if there's a product that really changed the way you hunt, like I like the gear that I use, sometimes I'll post pictures of it because it has changed, my approach to hunting in a positive way. But, the kind of the constant like selfie giveaway stuff or whatever is just like, that's almost become the identity of some of those, I guess, accounts, if you will. And I don't mean to like dog on them, but I don't think that necessarily helps the new hunter with anything tangible. Like the Hunting Beast, for example, like that saved hunting for me 4 years ago when I found it. When I found that in 2013 or 14, whatever it was, like that legitimately was like I don't want to say life altering, but as far as like my hunting life goes, that was like a hunting life altering moment when I found that kind of strategy and started putting pieces of the puzzle that I never understood before together. And you're just not going to get that from, the the selfie pictures and, you know, the just a simple harvest picture. That's the stuff that has more value, I think, to like the new hunter for hunter recruitment's sake too.
Right. And not only that, you know, you look at, you know, we had touched on it earlier. You said you'd never be comfortable taking a 50-something yard shot at a deer, you know, and I saw it a lot with introducing a new hunter, and he got really hooked on the Bow Hunter Die web series.
Yeah.
And I think those guys do a really tasteful job of explaining things, you know, so he watched a lot of that, but then he was watching something on the Outdoor Channel, and, you know, without naming names, a bow hunter on there took a shot at a world-class animal at like 70 yards and wounded him, you know. Well, I don't even want to get into it. You know, what anyone else does, that's their own, you know, they're going to have to answer to a higher power at some point. It's not me, so they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know?
The Bow Hunter Die guys, I will say, they do a good job. Like if they, you know, shank a shot or something, like they spend a good amount of time calling themselves out for it. You don't feel like you need to because they've already beat themselves up enough over it. It kind of is like refreshingly down to earth.
Right. And I think that's what, you know, with my own content that I want to start putting out, I've really gotten into the writing, and, you know, even doing a podcast with you and Hunting the Empire, I really think that there needs to be more people spreading knowledge rather than showing off. You know, I think that's what we're missing is teaching people, you know, morals even in the woods. You know, I lucked out. My fiance has a wildlife conservation management degree. She works at a zoo. She works with animals every day. She knew I didn't have to tell her anything. You know, when I was teaching her how to hunt, she said, I'm comfortable shooting out to 20 yards. That's as far as I'll go. Mm-hmm. But you take someone that sees, you know, if I saw a common ground bow hunter on Instagram, I said, man, that Reuben guy looks like he's having a great time. I'm going to pick up hunting. You know, but if you were posting videos of you shooting a deer at 70 yards, you just taught someone all wrong. And you didn't teach them how bad of an idea that is, you know, even from a moral standpoint, what you're doing, trying to take a life of an animal, you know, in a way that's just absurd, you know, with archery tackle, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think there's not enough of it out there.
Yeah, not enough of the kind of authentic side of things from like a upstanding moralistic standpoint. I guess it's become a little bit too much about inches, maybe is a good way to say it. Probably it's been said that way before, but it's definitely true. But yeah, I guess we're a little over an hour, and Joe's going to get upset with us if we keep blabbering on, because I think he's trying to keep them to an hour. So we got like halfway through what I wrote down. There's a couple other things, but we'll hit them next time. I was going to talk about some gear stuff, because I know that you're wearing some good gear, and that's something that you're always looking into, and I wanted to talk about wind and all that stuff, but got to save something for another episode.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we're going to keep the gear talk to a minimum on price. So I'm not going to bring any of that up, because if my fiance, it was on sale.
On a side note, I did do a podcast with Dan, and like, because some guy had talked about Kuyu, and I was like, you know, at that point in time, I had just, you know, recently had gotten my Kuyu stuff, and I was like, hey, I don't really think that he like represented it, you know, like completely. Like, I have a whole system, like he had a couple pieces or whatever, so can I come on and talk about my Kuyu stuff? And he's like, yeah, let's do it, man. And so I got through like my whole system, and he's like, now, what did you spend for this whole system? And I was like, oh man, I hope my wife never listens to this.
Don't even remind me. I don't even want to remember what I spent.
Yeah, exactly.
I purposely forget.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but it definitely is. I mean, you do get what you pay for that. So we'll have to hit on that another time. We'll just leave the price talk out of it. But anyway, all right, man. Sounds good.
I appreciate you having me, Reuben.
All right, take her easy, man.
You too.
Bye.
Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Hunting the Empire podcast. Thanks to Reuben and Brad for taking time out of your schedule to put a show together. And please go over to the newly redesigned Hunting the Empire website, www.huntingtheempire.com, and there you'll find all of our podcast episodes and articles. We're releasing 2 to 3 articles a week on various different topics, and you'll also find some video series that we're putting together on a range of things, and we're adding new content all the time. Multiple times a week we're getting new stuff up on the website, and that's going to kind of be our hub for everything Hunting the Empire, and we hope that you'll follow along with everything we got doing. So until next time, take care. Thank you.